What's up, everyone? Vinny, Hersh, good to see you guys. Thank you for being here. For everyone who's tuning in, this is our weekly Wednesday stream. We don't really have an official name for it. It used to be community calls. Now I'm just calling it Aligned and Friends. And today the friends are Hersh, aka EulerLagrange.eth, one of the founders of Opacity, very cool project, and Vinny, who is a researcher at EV3 Ventures. Guys, welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Boris. It's always a good time to talk to the EigenLayer folks. I feel like every time I talk to your team, it's rare to find a team in ZK that has like a strong product sense of like knowing what we need to do to actually get adoption for crypto, especially amongst like the more researchy crowd.
Thank you. That means a lot. That's something we've been thinking about a lot lately. And I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of interesting product stuff. So to kick things off, I think it'd be cool to introduce yourselves, who you are, a little bit of your background, what you're excited about. Whoever wants to go first.
Why don't you start off, Indy?
Sure. Oh, you want me to start it off? Okay, that's a good start. Hey guys, I'm Vinny. I do research and I invest at EV3. So we are an early stage pre-seed and seed venture fund, initially focused on DePIN. And I think we've also been able to invest in fundamental technologies that we believe in, like zkTLS. We were first check, and I've become very close with Hersh and the Opacity team. And I'd say now we look at the intersection of blockchains and enabling what we consider real world utility. So we look at that from a lens of whether it's energy resource networks or wireless or ISPs. We're talking about like large scale public utilities that can be built out in really novel ways using crypto. So always excited to noodle with you, Boris, and with Hersh. Excited about always meeting new founders and some of the exciting things on the horizon as well, that I'm sure we'll dive into and we'll be able to discuss today.
Yeah. Vinny's he's a sharp mind. If you have, send him your crazy ideas if you're looking to fundraise.
Send them all to me, please.
Yeah. So me, founder of Opacity, I first got into crypto back in like 2013 when I was 16 years old, right for the wrong reasons, just like fully pilled on decentralization back then. And my entire career worked in like crypto startups and like uh, I actually cared about trying to like do something useful with crypto. It's like one of the crazy people that thought it's like a good goal to have and just failed at it many times over. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion it's like what I like to call is like a poverty of verifiability. It's what's really limiting crypto use cases. And that's ultimately how I got obsessed with zkTLS and became a founder of like a zkTLS infra company. And I'd say that thesis is like pretty validated at this point, given like the use cases and all the excitement around like zkTLS. So super excited to get into it.
Sweet, yeah. And I think maybe a good place to get into it is explaining what is zkTLS. And I don't think I could think of anyone better than you two. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to dive in and give it a go. And Hersh can always correct me or add some color where it's helpful. I think broadly the way that we like to think about zkTLS, and I think a really good way to conceptualize it is you have all of this like siloed Web2 data, right? So if I'm Uber, the way my incentives work, I don't want to tell other people how many rides you've done. I don't want to tell them about your reputation. If you're a driver, I don't want to give away that information because it keeps people locked onto my platform, right? If you're LinkedIn, right, you don't want to give away an actual social graph of all your connections. You want to give, maybe there's a download feature, and when the download feature works, it's a name, maybe an email, maybe some sort of contact info, right? So what we actually see is a lot of this information and this data is held and siloed, and that's by design, candidly, because that is a way that the traditional Web2 companies have been able to keep people within their ecosystem, within their moat, and there's a stickiness to that. zkTLS essentially liberates all of that. And I think the exciting part is it doesn't just make traditionally siloed Web2 data verifiable, and we can get into how it does this too. I think the actual mechanics are pretty nifty when you talk about it for a while, but it also allows you to then build and layer economic incentives on top of that. So it's not just, hey, you have your information and we can validate it, but it's also that you can now create entirely novel use cases. It opens up this massive design space. And I think in many ways, Sal recently came out with, Sal's the MP of EV3, he's one of the managing partners of the fund. He came out with a piece, and I think there's some language in there that's really been resonating, which is just, this is like an insurgency technology, right? Like this is being able to liberate and create an entire design space that we haven't been able to conceptualize. And so I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the cool like vampire attack scenarios that are there. But to me, one of the really cool things are the use cases that we haven't even thought about, right? That we haven't really even conceptualized. And I remember when Hersh and I were first noodling on how this would come about and his architecture, and I was just sort of asking him questions, right? All of the examples that we came up with of some great use cases, some of them were built really well, but the real like winners that have knocked it out of the park, the Earnifis, for example, of the world, never would have come up with them, right? So oftentimes it's not just opening up this design space, but I think it's really interesting to talk about zkTLS because it's not just rich what you can build, and I think Hersh can expound more on all the cool work they're doing. But also there's a ton of use cases that we haven't even conceptualized that all of a sudden are possible and haven't been thus far. So I'll close my spiel on zkTLS there. Hersh, I don't know if there's any color you wanted to add or share with the people.
Yeah. Well, I guess just to quickly define it,
That might be.
like, yeah, HTTPS is secured by SSL and TLS. The TLS part is like how your browser knows it's talking to your bank. And so, simple, stupid, we can let you generate a proof that you have at least $5,000 from your bank account and the data came from like api.chase.com or whatever, right? That's essentially what zkTLS is. But the only color that I want to add is like, I've it's very you can explain zkTLS is like pretty simple at the end of the day, but the connection to like why it's such a big unlock for crypto sometimes is like very unclear. And that's like the only context I want to add. So like a subtle fact about blockchains, and actually ZK too, it's like they both have suffer from the same limitation where if you want to bring anything on chain or throw anything into like a ZK circuit, it needs to have this property of verifiability associated with it. How I like to define it is like something is verifiable, like the fact that I own this Twitter handle. If I could like everyone on the decentralized network can look at it and agree that it's canonically correct, right? If it has like that inherent property, it's verifiable. And if you want to access like your interoperability properties within like blockchain ecosystems, you need that. Otherwise, you have a trust assumption at the end of the day. Or for ZK, if you want to, even the simple example, proving you're over 21 without disclosing your birth date, you can only use that in the real world if like the government has like signed your birth date. And if they haven't, it's like garbage in, garbage out. You can't actually like use it to do like build like an interesting system. And so zkTL, and if you just consider how much inherently verifiable data there is in the world, it's like basically nothing. It's like emails are signed. If you do like OpenID Connect, like login with Google, you get like a signed JWT out. Your passport exposes signed data over NFC, and then just like some verifiable credentials out there. And so like zkTL is kind of like a hack to just like flood the market with verifiable data. And so it'll open up these different like consumer facing use cases for ZK and blockchains as a whole.
So that makes a lot of sense to me, and I've heard you explain this before, so I've kind of been primed already. But what I think might be useful to help other people understand, like, what is it about ZK or blockchains? Like, what is it that's like unique here that kind of like enables us to take some data, some signed data, and make it verifiable? Like, what is the cool property?
Okay. So it's not really well, so I guess just to like let's say we have a goal in mind. Like we want to disintermediate some market. We want to build some marketplace on top of like some Web2 API. Like for example, I want to pay you to like tweet out something, like as an example. Um, and so you want to like have strong trust guarantees on like the like when I pay money to a smart contract, it's like held in escrow until you generate a proof that you actually tweeted it out and you didn't delete it for some time, for example. You want to make sure that it's like completely trustless. Otherwise, you can't really like a blockchain, a market within a blockchain doesn't really help you. And so The annoying thing is like HTTPS and TLS, like the way they're designed is like it's like a weak form of security. Like it has an inherent deniability. So like if I make the request to my bank to get my bank balance, I know it came from the bank. But if I show it to like someone else, it's like all bets are off. It's just like a that's like how we define like a inherent deniability. And
Like
so
you could take a screenshot or something, but like, how can you really prove that that screenshot is real and not photoshopped?
Yeah, well, I think
exactly.
one of the Hersh, sorry to jump in, but one of the things too there is like you can also show somebody your it's called the TLS transcript, right? Which is the conversation that basically your computer has with a server. So to use Hersh's example of queuing up Chase Bank, right? My computer needs to go talk to the Chase Bank server to know. Well, I don't have an account at Chase Bank, but I'm sure all the people who do, their computer needs to talk to the server, and that generates basically a form of a conversation called a transcript between the server and my computer. The challenge here might seem really simple, which is just, well, then show somebody the transcript. The challenge, and this is, I think, what Hersh is alluding to, and I love nerding out on this stuff, so I'm just going to provide the detail, is that essentially, because I and the bank account, like the bank server, we both have the same key. Um, what that basically means is that we both can pretend to be each other. And Chase Bank has no reason to pretend to be me. But if I'm trying to prove to you, Boris, that I have, $100 million in my bank account, which I don't, I could do that because I could pretend to be Chase Bank. And so this is where I think the real challenge and the unlock in the design spaces that Hersh has been able to unlock and the team at Opacity has been able to go forth on. But I think that's a really interesting problem for people to know, is that you do have a transcript, but you don't actually know whether or not that transcript is official or whether somebody just chose to entirely fabricate it, which is why we need some clever cryptography and some methods to be able to like layer some of the incentives on top. But I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
that context. Sorry, Hersh, you're in the middle.
No, that's really great context. So we don't have to get into like the full details, but how to actually solve this problem that Vinny just explained really well, I thought was impossible to like bring it on chain. And the key unlock is actually uh, EigenLayer because there's like a you can look at this problem in a slightly different way. Can like add more details if you're curious, where you can solve this with economic security, right? And there's like some subtleties and like some potential attack vectors that can be accounted for, but then it's like access to cheap and abundant economic security lets you generate proofs that are secured with economic security versus like pure cryptographic security, which I would say is impossible to do unless we have new ideas in cryptography because of just like the
Hmm.
practical constraints of things have to be fast enough where they don't get timed out on the network.
So Hirsch, actually, this might be a good way to transition to the next bit I wanted to talk about, which is opacity itself, because I wanted to talk about EigenLayer and the role that EigenLayer plays in opacity and this whole zkTLS, creating proofs of verifiable, making data verifiable that we've been talking about. Because at Align, we're also using crypto economic security from Ethereum through EigenLayer, but in our case, it's to verify proofs much more cheaply and quickly and with higher throughput. But you're using it for something else. So I think, yeah, if we can jump into what opacity is and why EigenLayer, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So um, our AVS design is much more complicated than most, just by the nature of like the problem that we're dealing with. So we use the MPC approach to generating like these types of proofs. So like your actual handshake and request is done in MPC with like an economically secured node on the network, and we actually require running the node within a TE just to like we don't actually have a hard Intel trust assumption, but it's there to like optimize network architecture. Like without it, you just have to generate the proof a few more times just to like to convince you
Okay.
like someone that it's legit. Um, and then so like the providing economic guarantees against like running the correct T node and like making sure you're updating it. That uh, like EigenLayer like makes that pretty easy. But then the other part of it is like liveness, where we actually require like a random selection of the node on the network, where the user actually like commits to what they're trying to prove before the selection of the node. And it's done this way to basically make it harder to like pre-plan to try and collude, essentially. And so liveness is also an important factor.
Yeah, so I just want to even take things like a step back, right? So say you're a user and you want to generate a proof of your, I don't know, proof that you have $100 million in your bank account. You can't just make that proof, generate that proof yourself, even if you had like a really strong computer, let's say a really fast computer, because how would somebody know that the proof is legit? I mean, I guess they would have to verify it, but is there a reason why like you can just do this client side and you need to use MPC and do this across multiple nodes?
Yeah. It alludes back to what like Vinny was talking about. A pure client side like zkTLS proof is impossible unless we
Hmm.
have new ideas in cryptography. And
Okay.
it's because like so here, when you're doing HTTPS, like your server has a key pair, right? That's like signed by a certificate authority. So you can check that you're talking to like your actual bank that owns like api.chase.com. And then your client generates a random key pair. Step one, you do a Diffie-Hellman key exchange. That's just like lets you find a shared, like a point on your elliptical curve that you can only know if you know one of the private keys. And then in modern TLS, you like hash part of that shared secret to derive a couple symmetric keys. And those symmetric keys are actually used to like encrypt the request and the response. And the issue is the client knows the keys that the server is going to use. And you can only tie the actual communication to the symmetric keys, not like the asymmetric keys. And so anyone that knows the symmetric key can fake it. Like I can prove that I
Mm,
own the President of the United States Twitter handle because I know the symmetric key that the server is going to use.
And so I
okay.
So
think
it's like, wait here, in ZK, it's like we define it as proofs of knowledge, right? And this is the opposite problem. You have to prove that you don't have knowledge of something, which is where it gets
Okay.
nutty. Yeah,
I see. Which is why you need to do this across multiple parties.
Well, I
exactly.
think the other thing to add to that that I think Hersh is also alluding to, but I think is maybe important for people who didn't just follow all of that because there's a lot of technical jargon there. But is just that to what Hersh was talking about, right? You are trying to talk to your bank. This is the example used all the time, but you're trying to talk to your bank, right? Now we know that you and the bank both have, for the sake of this example, let's say the same key. It tends to be actually a pair, but you have access to it, so you can end up fabricating it, right? So how do you get a lot around this? Well, you have somebody essentially sit and watch over your shoulder, right? Like Boris, if you were sitting right next to me, right, looking over to make sure that I actually, logged into Chase and I didn't go to
Yeah.
ChatGPT and say, engineer me this page, but
Yeah.
the balance is $100 million, right?
Exactly.
You do
Yeah.
that in different ways, and you do that to make sure that the notary can't get access to your bank account, for example, or you end up doing it in MPC, right, to ensure that you're not just handing over your credentials. But essentially, the idea is that somebody is there to be able to watch. And I think to bring in one area for people about the EigenLayer is the interaction is, well, now we know what our attack vector is, right? As long as you have an honest notary coming and saying, I'm watching over your shoulder, things are good. But what happens if if Boris, you're sitting next to me, looking over my shoulder, and I'm like, I'll slide you $1,000, and you tell everybody that I have 100 million, right? Like it's great for me. You're economically better off, and so part of it, not all of it, part of the EigenLayer benefit too is that you can not just have economic stake, but also you can then punish validators that are caught to be doing something wrong, like for example, like colluding, right? And that adds like an economic value to it. I don't know if that's helpful context, but I just wanted to add that.
I think that's super useful. Like, yeah, I have an idea, I think a decent idea of how this stuff works, but I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who has never heard of this and is trying to get the right analogies to understand how this whole system works. It's like Opacity allows, digitally to be like using economic security, but provide a network of nodes that can look over someone's shoulder, so proofs can be generated of any arbitrary data. Because like we can't actually be sitting in front of each other's computers together, but if we want to do this, in a decentralized, distributed way, we need some network of nodes that are not going to lie about whatever proof they're generating, and that's what Opacity provides. And EigenLayer provides the economic security to like lock those nodes into a system that does this.
Yeah. If you That's exactly right. And you definitely need, like, you could do this in a centralized way. Um, if like you're like gonna sell to the market and the market is fine with that. But if it's like me and you are you're trying to sell me, I'm trying to buy from you like a tweet that I want you to tweet out, and we
Mhm.
don't. It's just like a transaction from me to you, like a disintermediate market. So it's like going to be
Yeah.
cheaper. You need a way to generate the proof where you and I can both trust it, and I don't have to like trust that you're acting honestly, or you don't have to trust that I'm acting honestly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I mean, we wouldn't be here if we didn't think that this sort of market or system is better than the current status quo with centralized intermediaries that we just have to trust. Because we could also just trust each other, you know? Like,
Yeah, I mean, we could just all just go to therapy and trust each other.
yeah.
It's just, why do we need all that? Sure, Hersh would have a great time if that
Yeah.
was the case.
But one area where we've like basically where we have PMF, like the general pattern that I've noticed of all the promising things that have like really blown up quickly is there's some intermediate market out in the world. And it turns out it's much more efficient if you go through the user, like you have them log into like their payroll system to prove how many hours they're working, or like log into their TikTok or Instagram and prove they engage with some content versus like going through the intermediary. And so like this technology is really powerful in disintermediate markets, which is like one of the original goals of crypto. It's like how I got like fell in love with it at a young age.
And what I like to believe is still one of the big goals of crypto. I like to anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So about this, like, I think a great thing to transition to talking about is like some of the cool stuff. Like, I know there's lots of cool examples, but maybe both of your favorite examples of products being built on top of Opacity that are using this to bring data on chain or allow people to generate proofs and make their data verifiable.
Yeah. I think EV3 has like invested in probably all like my favorite ones. Is probably
Yeah,
like a
I think we've been pretty fortunate to be able to back some really cool founders that are using this primitive and this tech to unlock some really cool use cases. So I'm sure that the examples that Hersh is going to bring up and I'm going to bring up, there's probably going to be a pretty significant overlap. But I think that's for good reason, because at the end of the day, it's because there are a lot of teams, I think, that are starting to realize how powerful this is and are excitedly like off to the races trying to build on it. I think one, and Hersh and I can go back and forth and probably name some of the few, but one to highlight, for example, is like Earnifi. And the reason I want to bring them up, I think that when I think about the use cases of zkTLS, right, you have the initial vampire attacks. And what I mean by that, for people who aren't aware, is I can go after and build a decentralized version of Uber, or I can build a decentralized version of Lyft. But as I mentioned, if you're a driver and you've been driving for 5 years on Uber, you have built up all of this reputation, your boosts, your scores, et cetera, how you're able to have 20,000 rides, let's say, that are 5 stars and you have a reputation. And if you go to a new app, you sort of lose all of that, right? And so there's a clear example where people vampire attack and they're able to sort of target it. But I think that there's a ton of other really exciting and novel use cases where you're actually able to layer economic incentives on top. And so Earnifi, I like to highlight as an example where they use zkTLS to verify that you've worked a certain amount of hours that week, and then to be able to give you better terms than your predatory payday lending companies for people who need cash within that 2-week period, right? So it's called earned wage access. Usually it's only available to really big players, and it involves a lot of negotiation, right? Because you have to negotiate between McDonald's, let's say, and then the payroll provider and some of these services. And with what Opacity's enabled Earnifi to do, all of that goes away, right? It operates directly on chain. It's immediately verified. And the really cool, I think, interesting thing too is you can start to automate a lot of this using smart contracts as well. So, I generate a proof of something, it's submitted to the smart contract, automatically take actions on the user's behalf, which is really interesting because it's not just, hey, we can take this existing Web2 business and make it Web3, but we can actually do something that wasn't possible at all before because now we have better access to these tools. So for me, highlighting to at least start one out, and I'm sure we'll go back and talk about many of them. I think Earnifi is one to highlight.
Earnifi. So just to help people understand, basically, there are these payday loans. People get paid every 2 weeks, but they need money sooner. This allows them to log into like their payroll app or HR app through their company and verify that they've already worked some hours and that they're going to get paid for
they know that they're going to get paid for those hours. Yeah. And
on a certain date. Yeah.
And I think the thing to think about, right, is like the payday loan companies too, from their perspective, if you're one of those companies, you're basically handing money to somebody and you have no idea whether you're going to get it back, right? Because you have no ability to say, hey, Vinny worked 10 hours this week or 15 hours this week. And so inherently, because of that, risk becomes a lot higher. And as risk increases, then people increase their premiums in order to be able to profit, right? And then to ensure that if defaults exist, that they're safe. And so it's not just, we can show you've worked X hours. It's we can actually offer you better rates because of this tech, right? So it takes something that's pretty predatory. I would argue that payday loans nobody's a fan of. I haven't, other than the companies that are issuing them, maybe. And it can offer that product better to the people who need it, which I think is a really cool example, needless to say.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see the comments, but Darufi is roasting you in the chat. It's only Wednesday, the week's just starting.
just getting yeah.
VC life. As of late, probably my favorite one that I unfortunately cannot talk about is what we're doing with Dig. And it's like it's not up to me. I've to be honest, like when Kevin tweeted about Dig and zkTLS, he like front ran. Like I wasn't expecting him to tweet about it. It was like a surprise to me that he even talked about it. But when that becomes public, I swear to God, we should do another Twitter Spaces because it's gonna blow people's fucking minds.
Oh,
But
yeah, definitely.
So why don't I do? We can talk about that now because I think you.
So here, I think.
So there's a tweet about Dig, and I mean for the younger viewers who may be not familiar with it, like what is Dig?
Okay, yeah. So Dig was the like Reddit before Reddit. Like elder millennials really loved it. Um, and then there was kind of like a bitter rivalry between Reddit and Dig. But this is like in the VC world, kind of like a classic case study where Dig did like a redesign that just like completely flopped, and Reddit was basically able to win essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like a lot of what's the word nostalgia around Dig. So the whole like there's like a great story like behind the rivalry where it actually ends up into what we're doing with Dig. Like, but I can't talk about it. Is the sad part.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get you on next time. Yeah.
Well, I want to also mention one other, I think, cool use case.
Well, so here.
Sorry, Hersh, go ahead.
Yeah, the one I like, Earnifi is a good one where I would have never seen that use case myself. It's just actually I was giving a talk at like Deep in Summit. I'm pretty sure like Vinny was there when I ran into like Aaron, who's like the founder of Earnifi, like that first day. And I was just like blown away. There's like a fucking 20-year-old kid who's just like knows a lot about this niche earned wage access market. It's like a techie version of payday lending. And this is like a recurring story. It's like all the good stuff is stuff I would have never seen myself. The first example of this would be Daisy. So
that's
they actually they have like a more of a Twitter presence these days. They're absolutely killing it, like fucking printing money. The average influencer on Daisy right now makes like a few thousand a month. Is pretty crazy. But just to define it, it came out of a random conversation where and it has to do with how Gen Z influencers like monetize their audience, like these smaller influencers on these like Web2 platforms. Like let's say I'm a Gen Z influencer. I have like a brand deal for like makeup, let's say, and that deal is denominated to payout per 100,000 views. And so there's a clever game that they figured out in like a disorganized market just to like increase the amount of views to get a bigger payout, but it's not like faking the views. What they'll do is like I'll be in a group chat with like a few thousand other influencers, and then before I post my content, I'll have coordinated with a few other influencers like right away as I post it. They'll go engage with it because in these algorithms they use like the amount of initial engagement is like determine if they just show it to more people, and especially if you get engagement from high quality accounts, it just goes gangbusters in the feed. And so that's like a huge disorganized market around like TikTok today. It's just not super public facing. And But the biggest pain point in this market is these influencers, first, like they're Gen Z influencers. So they have to like, they use screenshots in the honor system and they wait a few days to actually like distribute the money, essentially. And so if you could just like give that payment much more quickly, like with more immediacy, you just capture the entire market. That's all you need. That's basically what
Yeah.
Daisy has done. They sent a song into like the third spot of the Billboard 100 charts, like in the US. Like they're insanely good at making things go viral. The cost per
Man,
view of like advertising in this way versus like the normal way through like, TikTok and Instagram is a factor of 8 times cheaper, which is just more money in the hands of these influencers.
man, I need to start making TikToks of all of these conversations and getting in on this.
If you want to pump on TikTok, if you want to pump on Web2 socials, dude, we can make it
Yeah.
happen.
All right, good to know.
We'll
That's
start a
super cool.
challenge of some sort. We'll do like a zkTLS challenge of some sort, and we'll go viral from it. Like Ice Bucket.
Yeah,
It's, you know.
yeah. But like, bring your data on chain. I wanted to ask another thing about Daisy because like I actually have never downloaded TikTok. I don't think I can be trusted with such powerful, psychologically powerful technology on my phone. But something I wanted to ask is like now you're using zkTLS to verify that they've actually engaged with the content they're supposed to engage with. Are they also using crypto rails to do the payouts, just like stable coins?
They will be.
They will
It's
be. Okay.
actually so one of the things with zkTLS is like some of these products, it's a bit easier to iterate off chain. So they didn't start out using stable coins, but I actually just had a conversation with them where they're looking to like pick a stable coin provider and move things on
Yeah,
chain
because
because
that's like
it just can
even
be
more
cheaper.
efficient. Yeah, exactly. It's like every layer of the stack gets better, cheaper, faster. I don't know, more global with crypto. It seems, um, which is some of the stuff I'm very excited about. So cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the influencer marketing world, like one of the founders of Daisy, who's here in New York, said something really profound to me like once that I just like love this take, where he's been in influencer marketing his entire career, right? And he said every new job that he's gotten, he just gets closer and closer to the actual creator, where with Daisy, he's just dealing with the influencer directly. So
Mhm.
influencer marketing is an incredibly intermediate market. People have like agents and these brands will like go
Yeah.
to these big companies that then go to the influencers. The
Mhm.
beauty of this approach is you could just cut all the nonsense in the middle out and just like have brands talk to the influencers directly. And it just makes the whole market a whole lot more efficient. And you can do the payouts faster. It's like basically
Yeah.
better all around.
No, totally. When I heard about Daisy, my mind was blown because I have a friend who's an influencer, and I heard about like this exactly, and didn't really think too much about it. It's not my ball game, but it sounded very inefficient. It's just like they're all just trusting each other and taking screenshots and showing that they that they engaged with the content. And yeah, they have managers who take a pretty big cut, but also make it really easy for them to just like do these different brand deals. So I guess it makes sense, but a lot of opportunities for new tech for sure.
All you need is faster payouts for that market. Low attention span influencers.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, okay. I mean, so I feel like something fun would be like there's tons of portfolio companies or people you're working with who are working on cool stuff. I can name a whole bunch of other ones that I've met who are using Opacity and zkTLS. What are some that don't exist yet? Like, are there ideas you would like somebody to build? Like, if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, I'm building this," you'd be excited to invest in them or to work on integrations or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure Vinny has a few of these. I know EV3 is like a whole list internally that they're looking for founders for. The one that I think would be exciting to experiment with is like prediction markets on like private user data that's like more social oriented than like Polymarket. So like it would make more sense to like Farcaster than through like Polymarket. Like let's say um like Vinny, let's just say went through a bad breakup, right? And I'm trying to help him like get out more and like talk to more girls. We could set up a prediction market where where he gets a cut. I mean, you'd have to figure out how to set this up where people can just like bet on his performance, and so he's actually incentivized to like connect his Tinder account. You run like his conversations through like an LLM, and then you just like check to like track his performance, right? Um, Something like that. Like I think there's a lot of room to experiment with like these new types of prediction markets where you're sourcing like private user data at scale. It could be like one person, it could be like a group of people within a company, or there's like different ways to go
Hmm.
about it. But I think it's like someone needs to experiment with it and just like see what they can do.
That makes me think of some prediction market stuff I heard about, like HP. I think back in the day would have employees bet on if they would hit different like milestones. Um, I don't know if you've heard about this,
Whether
but
they hit different quotas, like they would just
yeah, like they, they had like company milestones, quotas, and like they had an internal prediction market, and they found this actually helped them set much more realistic goals as a company, like because teams have this sort of implicit or maybe explicit knowledge and understanding, so they're not just saying, oh yeah, we're going to have this done by Q3. There's a prediction market there, and they're given some money that they'll get paid out if the prediction is right. So this would like create this sort of incentive feedback loop where they wanted the predictions to be accurate, and this led to like better outcomes. You could do this, but socially, it's like,
yeah. No. I like that framing of it. To add on and kind of to what Hersh was saying, like I think you can think of a pretty rich design space for these things. So not just how many Tinder matches did somebody get, for example, but you could do something where it's prove that your salary is above a blank amount, right? Or who has the highest of the amount. Let's go with the Tinder example or the Hinge example, right? We can prove who has the most amount of matches without actually revealing the number itself, right? And we can do this with cryptography, and we can do this by generating a very specific proof for it. So there's like really cool, I think, nifty use cases where you can layer a lot of these incentives, whether it's on salary, whether it's matches, any real app or use case you can build. And I think we'll start to see a lot of like fun gamified versions of these popping up on chain, where we all put our money into a pool and we compete against each other to see some sort of stat. Or you could even imagine where we would compete in some sort of round robin tournament and then use zkTLS to verify who the winner is and be able to give them something, which I think is really interesting. There's a couple other areas too, as Hersh mentioned, that we've been kind of looking at, and we internally spend a lot of time talking about this technology and what it enables. I mean, it's one of the most exciting things that we think is being built right now in the space. And so, there's an example I want to bring up, and I have to give full credit to Hersh here, so he can add areas where I'm missing in and out. But it's just a really good example, not just I think from an implementation standpoint, but from how to think about what something like zkTLS could unlock, right? So Hersh, feel free to jump in at any point, but I'm going to use your invoice factoring example here. Basically, speaking of Coca-Cola, how does the Coca-Cola get to the bodega down the street? So I live in New York. We have an office here, ton of bodegas down the street, right? And usually that last mile delivery is done by a lot of these smaller trucking companies, right? Coca-Cola doesn't own every part of every fleet for every truck that they're sending around the world, right? So they use these smaller loan companies. The smaller trucking companies. Now, if you're a smaller trucking company, you have negotiated with Coca-Cola, you need their business, right? And so Coca-Cola has a deal where they say, and this is pretty common, but they'll pay 60 days, let's say, after they've received the shipment, right? So you end up with this market where you have these smaller participants who need to pay salaries or do repairs, et cetera. They've delivered the Coca-Cola and they're waiting on the money to come in. And so there's a loan market there that pops up, right? Where I can say, okay, you've delivered the Coca-Cola, it's in the store, I can verify that invoice, and I'm going to then front you some of that money with some sort of fee, right, in order to make sure that you can meet your immediate cash needs. The interesting thing is, how is that currently done, right? If you're a banker, you need to verify that invoice happens. And today,
There's a market in the trillions of dollars. Just want to say, this is the scale of this market.
It is just the trucking part is, I believe, $5 trillion annually per year. Annually means per year. Globally per year. That's the word. And so these are massive, massive markets. And currently, what happens? You send your login, your username, and your password either on a sheet of paper, email, text message to the banker. They log in on their computer. They check that you've delivered it, and then they're able to hand that back, right? So first of all, don't hand your, like, if we can avoid it, we want to avoid handing our like username and password logins to people, whether they're within our family or outside of it, right? So there's this massive security element too, but also there's this human element where you have to take the login, you have to sit down, you have to actually check in, make sure the invoice is there. What if we could make all of that automated, right? And so
there's a double spend problem too.
And there's a double spend problem as well, right? You know, you need to ensure that you're not, somebody else isn't writing a loan for something that's already happened, right? And so what we can do though is we can use zkTLS to verify that, let's say, the pallet of Coca-Cola is delivered. Engineer smart contracts such that it receives that proof that's been generated by the client and then issues whatever terms have been set, automatically sends the USDC directly into, you know, your wallet. And so now, not only do you have a much safer, much more secure method of doing this because you're not handing out passwords, but you can also automate it and you can make it work seamlessly in the background, right? And I think that's a really cool example of what this can do, because it's not just, oh, I can generate a proof. It's I can generate the proof. I can automate on smart contracts. It's a massive industry, and it's doing things quite archaically, right? And so I would encourage people, whether listening or not, to think about. I think a lot of these archaic businesses, or businesses that we sort of just take for granted, and think, can we revamp how they're operating? Can we revamp how they're thinking? So that's an example of a use case that I think we're pretty excited about, and we're always on the hunt and looking for who's going to build the next one, at the very least.
Yeah. Just to add, like the hardest thing to see in life is the thing that like isn't there, but if it was there, it'd make your life easier. Like imagine there's a market that has like trillions of dollars flowing through it. You have people just like manually going in to log in, and they don't realize it's like before Uber, probably no one thought that there was like pain around like waiting, calling for a taxi, and just like waiting around for it. They've just like habitualized this like human process of verifying invoices. You could just like turn that into a purely software solution, and you make the whole thing more efficient, right? This is like, it's crazy. This is like what happens when you have inherent TLS deniability. You have to have like hand over your login and someone goes to like log in as you to check that some information is there, versus just like having like a better way to do it.
Wow.
There's also an example I think I want to add here too, where, so we talked about like the B2B, like the larger businesses as well, but also I'd encourage people to think like your health data, all that's being collected, if you have an Apple Watch or your phone, right? It goes into the health app. Maybe you can read it. Maybe you can like analyze it. There's some services that might allow you to do that if Apple wants you to and is willing to give API access. But really all of that is basically just sitting there dormant, right? And I'm sure Apple and Samsung and the Google of the world will build their own trainer agents, so they'll build those. But you could develop a use case using zkTLS where, I lock up stake. If I don't work out 5 days a week for the month, I lose my stake, right? Or on the flip side, I authorize you and I say, here, buy me a gift with this kind of money. If I hit my goals, and zkTLS like scanning my Planet Fitness ID, right? Like if I hit those goals, if I go exercise, if I log that workout, then I want to be surprised by something, right? And so like these use cases, they're really simple. Like some of them don't need to be $8 trillion markets or $5 trillion markets, but I think that there's a lot of power in use cases that they enable, especially because, there's no way Apple's going to go and mess up their entire system trying to go shut that down if somebody wants to be able to, reward you for having worked out, right? But right now, how would you go about structuring something like that? Becomes a lot more tricky. So I think there's also like smaller examples that exist too that I think are very, very powerful that people will probably chance upon or be noodling on. And I'm really excited to sort of see how that plays out within the next months to years as well.
Epic. That was great. I can tell you guys have said all this before, but I'm happy you have, because this is like exactly what I was hoping for. So if anyone listening has connections in the trucking and freight industry, think about this stuff. This could be the big thing. I even just got like a fun little
I was really any industry, right?
Yeah.
I think for like the trucking, it's one of those things where we take a lot of things for granted. You walk in the store, the thing is there. At least I'll be candid. I knew that, okay, there's definitely systems of trucks that actually get the Coca-Cola to the store. And I'm sure there's many parties involved, but I never sat there and, was understanding how this space operated, or that like the login was going to happen. That requires at least some sort of visibility. And so really in any of the spaces, even like what people might consider the really boring industries, the quote unquote boring industries, I think there's a massive amount of potential for people to think of novel solutions to be able to work, whether it's trucking or freight, medicine, whatever you think. I think that there's an avenue where zkTLS can be quite well implemented. So
there's definitely
that's also the VC in me too. I mean, I want people to build things. I want them to continually do it. And I'm always in the hunt for people, working on great projects.
Naturally. It makes sense. I mean, yeah, there's probably some truck nerd out there who's just like, what do you mean boring industry? This is the coolest thing ever. Like, fuck you guys.
He's driving the truck right now. Listen,
yeah, he's just like,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, by the way, for that one man that's, hiking it across the country right now. In his truck, I apologize. Your industry.
A fun idea, maybe a hackathon project that could use some of this. The fitness examples are great. I used to use Strava a lot, and I know there've been like these walk to earn, run to earn, like step in experiments in the past, and this could tap into like the apps people already use to do something like that. Or I was just thinking, a smart contract that pays you out if you get good grades on your credit card. Your parents like say, I will actually give you this money if you get good grades on your report card.
Yeah,
you will get
or
your
improve
allowance.
It from like last semester too.
Yeah. Cool. Well, guys, I'm having a blast. I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but I'm sure we are all very busy, so I don't want to keep it too long. If you have more cool ideas you want to share, by all means, I'm happy to keep hanging, but I figured now might be a good time to wrap up. We've been here like 45 minutes. Wanted to just give you guys the opportunity to share any calls to action or anything else you wanted to pass on to our viewers before we wrap up.
Thanks for having us on, Boris. Always a pleasure. Big fan of the Align team and like the vision that you guys have for the company. I think we have a very common goal, is like the sense that I get with the Align team, even with like other people across the EigenLayer ecosystem. But on Twitter, Opacity Network, we just hired a marketing person, funny enough, so it'll probably be more annoying on Twitter in the upcoming months versus just like me shit posting. But I'm Euler on _Lagrange on Twitter. If you want to give me a follow, I will probably nonstop shit post funny ideas too. If you want to hear any more of those. But any call-outs for you on your side, Vinny?
Well, I was just gonna say, don't forget the double underscore. I didn't know I could do that. Because I remember when Hersh first was on Twitter, I was like trying to tweet at him or something. I'd comment at him, and I was like commenting totally the wrong person because I forgot the second underscore. So when you go follow him, make sure you remember the second one. Look, on our end, once again, Boris, thank you for having us. It's always fun to chat and noodle, and these are really exciting ideas, both what you were working on yourself, the Align team, and I'm glad we got a chance to be able to do this. So I appreciate you having us here, and hopefully we can do it again soon. On our end, we have a Twitter. It's EV3 Ventures. We post not really a ton of deal announcements there, but we post every now and then. I think the benefit there is if people are interested in looking at some really cool deep in projects or some really cool infra projects, always can look at what we follow. I'm on Twitter at Vinayak Kurup, but you could see me sort of through that following. And Sal is Danconia Crypto. He's one of the MPs, and Mahesh is Monero Mahesh. So we all have fun. I'm the only one who just used my full name. Still working on that. So please give that a follow. And then
strong cosign for a first check investment if you're a founder looking to fundraise too. It's a really good fund.
Please don't hesitate to reach out as well. We're always on the hunt for really interesting ideas, and even if there's barely a shred of an idea there, usually those discussions are how we end up piecing something together. And I think we found that not just ideas shift, but we're always on the lookout for great founders building great teams. And I think now is a really exciting time to be working in the space, whether you're entering crypto right now, whether you've been here for a while, because there's stuff like zkTLS that I think is bridging this gap. I was listening to Leighton at World talk about, we used to have these two siloed systems, and now they're coming together. And I think zkTLS is one of those primitives that will enable that. If you're working on anything cool, please don't hesitate to hit me up or reach out. I'm Vinayak at EV3.xyz. You can find me on all the socials, LinkedIn, etc. And then also, if you're interested in the DePIN space as a whole, we put together a really comprehensive report called State of DePIN. So it's 104 pages, I think, just about everything in the DePIN space. And then also I wrote State of zkTLS, which was also co-published with our friends at Masari. That is, I believe, still paywalled, but that should be coming to all users pretty soon, because it's a pro article and they make those available pretty soon. So hopefully that'll be there, and when it's there, I'm sure I'll be able to send it around. So if you're interested in zkTLS, you can look there as well. Just
Amazing.
go to EV3.xyz and everything will work out. How about that?
It'll all be there. Yeah. And
XYZ and everything else will work itself out.
you guys are tagged in the tweet as well for like this actual stream. So for anyone who is watching, you can find these guys really easily. Vinny, Hersh, this was awesome. Thank you guys for coming on. Always a pleasure. If you're tuning in and watching live, thank you for watching. And if you are watching, also thank you for watching if you're watching the recording on YouTube or at a later date. You can find me on Twitter as well, in all of the aligned channels, Discord, Telegram, etc. If you have suggestions for like future guests or topics you would like me to find some smart people to talk about, please don't be shy. Trying to make these conversations useful for like our end, for the community, hopefully get some cool new ideas out there, get people thinking about stuff you can build with ZK. So that's the whole point of all this. And thank you again, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Bye.
Peace.
Bye.